start. We should be good to go.
Okay.
Are you introducing David, or are you going?
I think he's gone, so it's me and you, I think.
Okay. Afternoon, everybody. Hope you're well. So I want to introduce you to Andy Horton. I know Andy's slides, he introduces and talks about himself and school. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to yourself, Andy. Thank you for this afternoon.
Not a problem. Right, hello everyone. This is a bit strange for me because obviously I can't see anyone, so I assume there are people at the other side of this camera. So I'm gonna, in a moment, I'm just gonna click play on my presentation, and I'll take you through it as best we can. Elizabeth, if you keep an eye on the chat for me,
yeah,
and then any sort of questions that come up, and then we'll go from there. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
If I hit play now, you'll all disappear. So bear with me. Okay, Elizabeth, can you just let me know that you can see the slide at the on this full screen? Is that correct?
I
say
think so. Can I see a different view to what everybody else sees?
Right, okay, no worries. As long as you can see my first slide, I know it's on.
See your first slide.
Brilliant. Right, okay, so who am I? So I am Andy Horton. My Twitter handle, if you want to give me a follow, is @MrHorton2. If any of you know who @MrHorton1 is, if you could find him for me, I've been trying to find him and finish him off, basically. I am head of school at Shevington Vale Primary School, which is in Applebridge. It's a 1-form entry primary school. In just outside of Wigan. We have 193 children on roll at the moment. I've got 101 children in school and 92 who are remote learning. And I myself graduated from Edgehill. I was part of the class of 2012. So I have been where you have been, but nothing like in the capacity that you currently find yourselves. So I do feel for you in your current situation, but hopefully my presentation today will give you a bit of an insight into how we move as a school, and I think, to be honest, how education is starting to move forward. So for those of you that don't know my school, this is it. Okay, I am hoping to try and go for an award of the best looking school on planet Earth. We're halfway there. So that's the frontage of the school in the top left, my entrance hall in the top right. So we're currently going for an award as a therapeutic school, which incorporates a whole host of things, but one of those is calm areas. So all our classrooms, all our areas, basically there's no wild colours as such. We try and maintain quite a mature atmosphere around our school. Basically, we don't want it to look like a school, as strange as that sounds, but the impact that has on our children is quite huge, especially as they go further on up through the school. Bottom left hand corner is my reading cafe. So children work in there as baristas, and we serve cappuccinos, etc., to the general public. That was obviously pre-COVID. Post-COVID, we're more of a takeaway now. And the bottom right-hand corner is my reception classroom.
Andy,
Go on.
We're having some trainees are saying that it's not, the slides aren't moving.
Are they not?
Right. But we can see now. We can.
Okay, I tell you what, we'll just do it this way. Okay, is that all right?
Yeah.
That's fine. So in the top left-hand corner is the room I'm actually in now. I got kicked out of my office because we've got an EP in there. So this is an intervention room where just children come and work. Top right is my library, which we're very, very proud of. And then I've got your corridors around my school. And my bottom right, we opened in September as a wellbeing centre. So we now take children from other schools who are struggling to access their reception classes, mainly through things like behaviour and SEND. And they come and work with staff 2 days a week in our school, in the wellbeing centre, and then go back to their schools Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, where they hope that the skills that they've picked up inside the wellbeing centre then support them. Okay, right then. So to kick us off, quick quiz for you, and I'm going to just sort of do this as I go. A bit of a focus on schemas, which I'll explain what this means. Okay, so hopefully you can all see an image here. Okay, on the chat, if you wouldn't mind, throw out your hopefully educated guesses as to where you think in the world this is. So Elizabeth, if we give 30 seconds, just on that chat, if you throw in where you think this is. And then as they start coming through, Elizabeth, just shout a few out for me that you've got.
Nothing yet. Oh, Japan.
Brill.
Japan.
Good. Any advances on Japan? Anyone able to go? If we were talking Google Earth, anyone able to zoom in a bit closer and pinpoint where it is?
Oh, no then. Mount Fuji, Japan.
Who put Mount Fuji?
Mount Fuji, Japan was Christopher Kidd.
Christopher Kidd, 2 tokens, well done. Right, so Mount Fuji in Japan. So the majority of people went with Japan, okay, so well done for that. What you have done there is, I imagine that most of you, maybe Christopher Kidd has, I don't know, but most of you won't have actually probably been there yourself. If you have been travelling, well done, but you won't have been there yourself. What you'll have seen in throughout your education or on the television is you'll have seen an image of Japan. Okay, and you'll know that certain things in this image are synonymous with what you have already seen. So, for example, the cherry blossom tree is, well, it's the tree of Japan. It's synonymous with Japanese culture. You can see the architecture there. Some of you may have, in your brain, without it realizing, gone, that looks Chinese, that looks Asian, which is why maybe a few guesses may have said sort of Korea. And then, of course, the mountain in the background. Again, for those of you that perhaps don't have great geography, but you may have known that Japan does have quite a famous dormant volcano, Mount Fuji, and there you're able to pinpoint it. So by asking you that question, okay, you may not have had specific knowledge. You certainly won't have been experts on Japan and Japanese geography, but your brain takes what it already knows about other things, pieces that all together, and is able to answer the question here. And most of you did that very, very well. Right, my next slide for you. Again, 30 seconds in the chat. Where in the world is this? Where in the world is this? And then Elizabeth, again, just shout out any answers that you get.
Bit slow coming through.
It's all right, no pressure.
Oh, they're coming. Italy.
Okay.
Croatia.
Brilliant. Right. Okay. So if I was to say
Croatia.
Game of Thrones, does that change anyone's answers? Can you pinpoint where in the world this is now that I've said Game of Thrones?
We've got Greece.
Ten more seconds. See if anyone can get it.
Greece. We did the Game of Thrones tour, you know, in Northern Ireland. Amazing. Croatia.
Well, I did the Game of Throne tours at this place, which is Dubrovnik.
Dubrovnik. We've got Dubrovnik.
Well done. Who put Dubrovnik? Brilliant. So, well done. So again, what you've done there is some of you may recognise, and those of you that said Italy, I can see exactly why you've done there. You've got Roman walls, the orange rooftops, synonymous with certainly coastal areas of Italy. The cliff edges, again, synonymous with Italy. You can sort of tell that it's got a Mediterranean feel to it, but it is actually Dubrovnik in Croatia, which of course is where many of the episodes for Game of Thrones was filmed. And again, what your brain has done there is it's pieced all of those things together and managed to answer what is quite a difficult question, especially if you've never been to this place before, but it uses what it already knows and thinks, right, most of you have gone European, which is a good start. All of you essentially have gone with Mediterranean places. So again, without even realizing, your brain has accessed that knowledge in order to have a good educated guess at my question. Right, this time I'm showing you 3 images. Okay, now hopefully it's not mirrored when you're watching it. On the left, you've got a sandstone image with an Egyptian column. In the middle, you've got a sphinx, and in the third, you've got a second Egyptian column there. Okay, so I'm going to number them from left to right, 1, 2, 3. 1 being the sandstone, okay, and 3 being the Colosseum with the blue sky. So what I'd like you to tell me is, which picture is taken in Egypt? Is it image number 1, image number 2, or image number 3? So which image is taken in Egypt? Is it image number 1, image number 2, or image number 3? So just fire over your numbers. 1 being the sandstone image, 2 being the Sphinx, and 3 being the Colosseum with the blue sky.
Okay, number 1, 2, 1 Luxor, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. Who did Matthew McIntyre said 1 Luxor.
Brilliant. Okay, well done. We'll stop you there. Well done, Matthew. Okay, so yes, this is Luxor Temple is image number 1, and that is the picture that is taken in Egypt. I'd assume with that level of knowledge, you may have been yourself, or when you've studied ancient Egypt, have probably looked at that temple quite closely. The image in the middle is actually the Luxor Hotel in Las Vegas. I've not been there myself. It is on the bucket list, but that is the Sphinx outside. Okay, so if you look quite closely behind the Sphinx head, you can just start making out the glass building, which obviously wouldn't have been synonymous with the Egyptian times. And then the third image is actually taken in Rome, where the Colosseum did belong to Ramses II until it was pinched by the Romans and installed. It's now in the middle of a roundabout in the centre of Rome, and they've actually now put a Christian cross on the top of that. So all of those 3 images, again, your brain will know they're all synonymous with Egypt, because we all develop that knowledge of ancient Egypt, because all of us will have done some study of it at primary school, most likely. And those images stay with you. The blue and gold on the Sphinx head, of course, synonymous with King Tutankhamun. And all your brain is doing is piecing together all of that information. So when I've asked you which one is taken in Egypt, it's confusing for your brain, because all 3 of them look like they could be. But what you then do is then you're able to use your schemas to build upon what you already know to know, well, actually, image number 3 is a Christian cross on the top. It looks, it doesn't quite look like Egyptian buildings in the background. Image number 2, again, that Sphinx looks too well painted to be of anything ancient. And then obviously image number 1, even just by deduction, you would maybe be able to work out where that image was taken. So what I've done there is briefly introduced to you and tested you on how your brain is actually working in real time. Okay, that is all we do as teachers in school. All right, we're constantly questioning our children and understanding what it is they already know before we present them new information. A good way to describe this is looking at our long-term memory. So this is how we develop, okay, from early childhood right the way up into being an adult. Okay, so early learning. So I have a 2-year-old son, and he is at this stage. So we see birds at a very young age, and we learn that they are creatures who fly. And if you were to ask a nursery child to draw a bird, they would probably draw this image, because they often see birds in the sky and they create that wave sort of symbol in the air, and that's how they draw them in the work. Actually, to be honest, some of my juniors still draw birds in the sky in the exact same way. But that's all they'll know. So my son Arlo, all he knows is that they're birds. He calls them birdies, and he'll point them out. He won't name specific types of birds. He just knows that they're birdies and that they fly. As children get older, they suddenly develop a bit more of a knowledge. Okay, so beak and feathers start to become words that are synonymous with types of birds. Okay, so if they to feed a bird, they may recognize that they use a beak. If they see feathers on the ground, then again, through the education of parents, they may know that birds have feathers. So this is a drawing from a nursery child, and you can start to see that this child has developed the knowledge that a bird does have a beak and also does have wings, and again has drawn 3 feathers on the back there. In reception and in year 1, or certainly in our reception and in year 1, they will learn that birds lay eggs, okay, and they'll learn that through the life cycles part within their science. In year 1, they'll also start looking at habitats and learn that birds create nests. They may have already developed this knowledge in reception when looking at eggs, but they'll learn it in the context of habitats and where animals live, again, then in year 1. And as children then are just adding to that knowledge that they already have of birds. Again, this is just one area of learning. In year 2, they would then be presented with the knowledge that not all birds fly, and they'd learn that in the animals including humans section in science. And then in our year 2, they would learn that penguins, for example, are a bird who doesn't fly, and they are Arctic animals, synonymous with the Arctic, and they would learn that during their creative topic, which would be Arctic explorers. So again, not everything that they learn about birds will be through science, but the brain will store all that information. So I know a bird is an animal that flies. I know they have beaks and that they have wings and that they have feathers. I now know that their main habitat is a nest that they will create. Hang on a minute, in year 2, I'm being taught that not all birds fly and that one of those types of birds is a penguin. But I do know that penguins can be found in the Arctic. Scoot along to year 4. Hang on a minute, it's just gone slow on me. There we are. That there are some species of penguins that live in warmer climates. So again, we're adding to that knowledge. I know what a penguin is. It's a type of bird. I know that most penguins, or some penguins, can be found in the Arctic. However, I'm now being presented new information during a study of Australia that some species of penguins live in warmer climates. And the fact that we then get to look at Australia means that we have any excuse to look at this image. So I don't know if you were ever on Facebook or Twitter in sort of the last 3 months, this image went quite viral, that it's of 2 penguins who meet up every night in Melbourne. So they're both widowed, and they come together every night to watch the lights in Melbourne Harbour. And again, when I first saw that image, well, obviously it melts your heart, doesn't it? But secondly, I was surprised by seeing 2 penguins in a sort of city skyline. And even, you know, at my age, it was new knowledge to me that penguins actually exist in these environments. I'm so normally associating them with winter climates. So that knowledge is being built upon all the time through life of a child's knowledge of birds. Again, alongside that, they're learning everything else, okay? So in year 4, year 5, children would begin accessing spy novels like Alex Rider. So that's on the Reading Renaissance scheme at around that age. Some of them might get to it earlier, some of them might get to it later. But generally, around year 4, they would start reading the Alex Rider adventures, which of course are based upon a child's spy, similar to that of James Bond. So through a love of reading there, children might be introduced to the world famous spy 007, okay? And once you then grasp 007 or watch a film with your dad or mum at home, you then start to learn that tuxedos are synonymous with spies. And all of this knowledge is linking together so that when finally, as an adult, and you watch Madagascar penguins, you then realise why the Madagascar penguins are actually spies. Madagascar penguins live in warm climates. They are black and white. Okay, it looks like as a penguin that they're wearing a tuxedo. Okay, that makes them synonymous with spies. So the Madagascar penguins often carry out missions and capers because their whole character is based around the fact that they are spies, and that is simply because penguins look like that. Now, as children, and to be honest, even some adults might never ever make that connection. But if you have that prior knowledge and it's been added to and added to and added to and added to and added to, then that information suddenly makes sense. It's why when we watch a lot of Disney films, a lot of adults get some of the humor and the children are like, that wasn't funny, I don't understand that. And it's because the adult has developed their knowledge, has a better understanding of what it is that's going on. All of this helps us answer the question, what is learning? And that's essential when you're in education, because if you don't know what it is, how do you actually facilitate it? Okay, so by definition, learning is a change of long-term memory. It's a change in knowledge, understanding, and skills. If nothing has changed in a person's long-term memory, then nothing has been learned. Okay, there is a lot of learning that takes place all day, every day, and your brain will only process so much of it. In fact, a lot is wasted, an awful lot is wasted. And this is something that we're trying to work on in our school, what it is that we want our children to retain. So if nothing has changed in a person's long-term memory, then actually the question is, have they learnt anything at all? Okay, so your long-term memory is infinite, which is quite frightening when you think about it. Okay, but we can store unlimited amounts of data in our long-term memory. Your working memory, however, is finite. There's not much space in your working memory. Most research suggests maybe 15-20 minutes. You know, if you think about your Friday morning, you're probably looking at 7 minutes, aren't you, if we're honest. In that time, we take in the information and we process this in our working memory. So if a person was at the front more knowledgeable than us and they were talking to us about Japanese architecture, then we would listen and process about 15-20 minutes of that information. We then store some of this information in our long-term memory. Okay, that word some is quite important. If you think about when you ask for directions, we don't really do it now because of phones and sat navs. But if you've ever done it and the person goes bottom of the road, turn left, over the roundabout, take the second exit, pass the shop on the right, turn right at the bottom of the street, you lose what that information is very, very quickly. Okay, so your brain can only process so much at once. All right, it's why we struggle to take in a lot of information. However, our brain, what it does do is it cleverly builds schemas, which I sort of call like files on your computer, which can be brought back into our working memory at any time. So, for example, I have all that knowledge on birds, okay, and if someone was to suddenly come and do a lesson on the American eagle, the folder in my brain would immediately alert me to the fact that I've already got quite a lot of prior knowledge about birds, okay? And it brings it into my working memory. So it says, you need to listen to this because I'm going to add this to your long-term memory, okay? So this is why when we look at our curriculum and when you guys go on to deliver your units of work, it's really, really important to look at how that knowledge is being built upon each time. The asterisk that I've put there next to working memory is to remind us about extraneous load, and I'll discuss that in just a moment. So the schemas are built using links or cues to prior knowledge. That's what we call them. Okay, the brain builds upon schemas so that more powerful knowledge can be easily accessed again and again. So that's where you become an expert. Okay, so when you go on Mastermind, you don't take a range of subjects, you choose your one subject. Okay, so for those of you that were able to name Luxor Temple or Dubrovnik in Croatia or Mount Fuji, you may have a level of expertise in that specific area of geography because you've been engaged with it more, you've had better teaching, you've had an interest in it, so you've stored more of that knowledge in your brain so that when I asked you the questions, you were able to access it quicker than others, and also more intently than others, just because you had a greater understanding. One of the ways that I always try and show it is through the Disney Pixar film, Inside Out. Okay, so I'm going to try and play this now for you, but obviously we are having a few issues with the slides, so just bear with it and hopefully it should play. But it already is spinning the circle. Come on, don't do it.
Phone numbers. We don't need all these. They're in her phone.
Forget all of that, please.
Hi.
Forget it.
I need to find Friendship Island. 4 years of piano lessons.
Yeah, it looks pretty faded.
You know what? Save chopsticks and heart and soul. Get rid of the rest. All right, U.S. presidents. What do you think?
Yeah, just keep Washington, Lincoln, and the fat one.
Forget them.
Hey, you can't throw those away. Those are perfectly good memories.
The names of every cutie pie princess doll.
Yes, that is critical information. Glitter Storm, Honey Pants, and
Forget them.
Hey, bring those back.
They're in the dump. Nothing comes back from the dump.
Yeah, look, lady, this is our job.
When Riley doesn't care about a memory, it fades.
Fade?
Happens to the best of them.
Yeah, except for this bad boy. This one will never fade.
The song from the gum commercial.
You know, sometimes we send that one up to headquarters for no reason.
Plays in Riley's head over and over again, like 1,000,000 times. Let's watch it again.
I know, we all know the song. Okay, yeah, real quick.
Okay, what do you think? Should we do it?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
Well, thank you, Mom.
Wait,
Wait, do you know how to get to Friendship Island? Do you like it there? Did you?
Okay, so I'll just give it a second in case some of you are behind with your lagging internet, because I know mine's just starting to slow on me. There we go. Right. Okay. So the video that you watched there, apologies if it didn't work for you. Essentially, in that movie, they're in the human brain, and they've gone into long-term memory, and there are mind workers, and they're hoovering up the memories that are starting to fade. And what they say is that those memories go to the dump. And they give examples that the young girl had piano lessons for X amount of years. So they say, you know, we've got all these songs and scales. Which ones do we need to get rid of? And they say chopsticks. And it's amusing because actually we all know chopsticks, or anyone who can said they had piano lessons comes in, and the one thing that they play is chopsticks, or Jaws is the other one. And it's because that's the one that they've practiced over and over and over again, and then whenever they see a piano, that's the one they go to play. Okay, they might have learned Beethoven's First Symphony, but they certainly can't remember that on cue all the time. It will be somewhere in their long-term memory, but because they're not revisiting it often enough, it starts to fade. Okay, the memory of the US presidents. Now, in US education, they'll learn all of their presidents and the names of them, but that will fade the longer they don't continue to revisit the names of those presidents. Now, there is research to suggest that those memories that do get lost to the dump can actually come back. Okay, that we have triggers, and if we think about sort of later on in life in terms of dementia patients, and you see those amazing videos where certain songs and smells can bring back people's memories. There's a lot of research going on about that now as to whether or not, as humans, everything that we're storing can actually again be accessed. It might put us out of a job as teachers, but essentially it would be rather impressive if they eventually came across it. So with that knowledge of long-term memory, and that we're adding all the time and that we're building these schemas, it's essential that we align our curriculum so it builds upon what has previously been taught. Okay, We can't reteach everything. You can't. You don't have much time. In this school, we have, what, 182 days, 183 days, 6 hours a day. When you break that up into your subjects, especially into those what we call non-core, you don't get much time at all. So what you've got to try and do is make links across your curriculum. Okay, so for example, if we take invasion, all right, they'll visit the Trojan horse when they study ancient Greece, they'll look at the Romans, they'll look at the Vikings, and they'll visit World War II in year 6. So they'll visit on many occasions different types and periods in history where countries, even our own country, was invaded, and the impact that that had upon that country and the world. So it's important that we recycle those links. So it's no good just teaching them about the Romans and then never talking about Romans again until you meet someone later on in your life like me who randomly asks you, where's this image? Is it Dubrovnik? Okay, because in order to maintain that knowledge and build upon those cues, what we've got to do is constantly refer back to things that they already know about. So, for example, year 5 have the essay question at the end of the spring term. How have invasions benefited society? Okay, so they actually study the Saxons and the Vikings in year 5. All right. However, they have also studied the Romans. They'll have also done the gunpowder plot in year 2. And what we're trying to get them to do is actually to discuss how those invasions benefited society. So looking back at the Romans, and we look at the sewage systems and the democracy element, when we look at the invasion of the Vikings invented the keel, which meant suddenly the human race was able to travel much further distances across oceans. They didn't invent Amazon Prime, but we make that link across to say that, well, if the keel didn't come with the Vikings, then we certainly wouldn't have Amazon Prime that we do today. And then when we look at World War II, okay, it's hard to see a benefit that came of World War II, but actually the V2 bomb was created to be used as a weapon, but also was the first rocket to enter space. So suddenly, with that knowledge and that science being used in war, we were then able to initiate space travel and get a man on the moon. All right, so once we've touched upon those units with our children, what we try and do is constantly refer back to them. We don't do that every lesson, we don't even do it every week, but our essay questions are often written quite vague in order to try and encourage the teacher to get as much coverage as they possibly can. So what that looks like in a school, okay, on paper, I have sent the PDF to Elizabeth and David, if this comes out a bit blurred, because on my screen it does. Okay, there we go, it's looking a bit better now. Is we create a long-term plan for every single year group. Now we've set ours out like the blueprint for a museum, because you may remember the buzzword around the new curriculum was knowledge rich, and our thinking was that if we treat everything like every subject like an exhibit, they visit each exhibit and they leave the museum knowledge rich before they move on to the next year group. But we stipulate what is taught in those year groups, and that's quite different to how we used to work. We used to be we called it creative curriculum, where we would discuss with the children what it is they wanted to learn and how we were going to do that, and we made hundreds of thousands of cross-curricular links. But the research told us that a lot of the learning was being lost in teaching like that. So what we've done now is we've really narrowed and focused what it is that specifically is going to be taught in each year group, because what we want to happen is what is taught is in year 3 is then built upon in year 4, that there isn't this gap after year 3 until they then look at electricity again in year 6. Okay, we try and touch upon those things each year. These are edited by class teachers and tweaked, but generally they stay the same. Beneath them sits these documents, which we call progressive knowledge and skills documents. Okay, and we have these for every single subject. Now, the reason I always show the art is because my art knowledge is terrible. So as a classroom teacher, especially in primary, there is this expectation that you're an expert in all fields, and you're not going to be. Okay, that's the truth. I hate to break it to you, you're not going to be. There are going to be some subjects, like mine was with art, that you would avoid like the plague and then do maybe 3 days of it before you broke up for half term. Okay, what we've developed now are these documents where we say to each teacher, this is what the children have to do in this subject. And you can see that it's progressive. So everyone gets the same document. So if I'm the year 6 teacher, okay, I know that I've got to teach them how to describe a particular style that they are using. But I also know that they should be able to do that quite easily because they've already been able to use a viewfinder, they've already been able to record observations, they can use a sketchbook to collect, use a sketchbook to explore ideas, and use a sketchbook to refine their ideas. So they should already have the knowledge of those things before coming to me. Okay, and one thing that we would often fall down with, especially in the foundation subjects, is that we would try and reteach stuff when we didn't need to. Okay, children already have a vast understanding of what it is that they are coming across, and we would do them a disservice. I think we would make it far too easy for them. So we try and pride ourselves on a challenging curriculum. Some days it's not, you know, we're still human, we get it wrong. But by using documents like this, we know what's come before and we know what's coming afterwards. So we can actually plan lessons to work in that manner. So your working memory. So that's how our school has aligned everything to attack the long-term memory so that we can build upon information for our children. The working memory is our day-to-day. It's the children that come into class. How are we tackling that? So what we've got to understand is that we're lazy creatures, okay? Biologically, it's ingrained in us to keep ourselves safe, okay? So the brain is wired to avoid difficulty. So our working memory is relatively limited. It changes from person to person, but generally, as I mentioned before, it's around 15 to 20 minutes. Okay, that's because the brain it just wants to keep you safe. It wants you to survive. It doesn't really want to put you out your comfort zone. To increase the capacity of working memory, the brain needs to be fed information that it can link. Okay, so what you're doing is you're making it easier for the brain. Okay, so you're saying, right, we're going to learn something new, and the brain suddenly goes, oh no, it's going to be too hard. But actually what you then say is, but you can link this to something that you've already done in year 5, and suddenly the brain goes, oh, hang on a minute, I'm going to listen here, okay, because I've already got some knowledge of this. I can start accessing cues and links from those folders about birds, and we can add to it. Visual aids. We process pictures 1,000 times faster than words. Okay, which is why when you've ever written a best man speech or anything, you remember the visual of performing the speech, not the speech that you had written. We process pictures 1,000 times faster than words. Chunk new information. Okay, so we try not to present too much at once, which is something I'm obviously aware of whilst I deliver this PowerPoint, but we try and present information to our children in much smaller chunks, because we know if we give them too much, they're not going to take it all in, and a lot of that learning is just wasted. And finally, we're trying to reduce the extraneous load. Okay, the best way to think of that is distraction. And I'm going to be open with you and discuss volcanoes. Okay, so volcanoes was a topic that I would cover under natural disasters with year 5, 6. The aim was always to create one of these. This is what I wanted at the end of a 2-week unit of volcanoes. That's what I was going to do. Kids were going to love me. We were going to have a great time. Okay. What I needed children to know about volcanoes was I needed them to learn the technical vocabulary. So lava, chamber, summit, crater, ash, magma, crust, and all of those words synonymous with volcanoes. I also needed them to know the definitions. What do those words actually mean? I need them to know how a volcano forms. I need them to know what causes an eruption. I need them to know the impact of climate change. That's going to be quite important for their lives growing older. And I need them to know where active volcanoes are. That's actually quite an important piece of information. And within that volcano topic where we built our volcanoes, I would teach those things. Okay. At the end of 2 weeks, though, what children actually know is that PVA glue is rubbish. You can find rude words in the newspaper. Mixing the colour brown ruins all the other paints in school. Paper mache takes ages to dry, even on the windowsill. The reaction caused by mixing baking soda and vinegar is actually quite disappointing, and the classroom absolutely reeks afterwards. Okay, so on that 2-week unit where I'll have aged 10 years in trying to create these paper mache volcanoes, the learning that takes place is not beneficial. Okay, and what really hit home with me was when, after a 2-week unit on volcanoes, my children could not tell me where Mount Etna was and if it was still an active volcano. I genuinely had taught it, but they had not retained that information because they were too busy paper macheing a volcano. And if we're honest, our children, especially in this country, when learning about volcanoes, they need to know that one of the world's most active volcanoes is a 2.5-hour flight away. That's a really important piece of information, because a lot of our children will just, again, at year 9, make that connection with the Ring of Fire and assume that all volcanoes are in that area of South America, which of course is incorrect. Again, Iceland, you know, there's a lot of knowledge that those children should have. And when we do things like this, it actually causes an issue, and it causes misconceptions. So it's really important to focus on what it is you want your children to learn. And it's hard because I don't want to be the grim reaper of education, because actually it's like a rite of passage. Every child should get to make a volcano, but think about how you're going to do it. Teach the knowledge first, and then have a day where you make the volcano. That's the correct way to do it, so that you know they've got that knowledge, and then you can create your volcano. We're looking at a lot of research about our trips at the moment, whether or not we used to use trips as a hook. So go on the trip, engage them in what it is they're going to be learning about. But there's some research now suggesting that teach them everything about that first, then take them on the trip to see which one would have the greater benefit. So in the classroom then, here we go. We then now start to put the focus on the input. So what do our children need to know? Reminding our teachers, you've got 15 minutes. You've got 15 minutes with them, okay, where they're going to absorb the information that they give you, that you give them, and then they're going to go away and practice that. So in that 15 minutes, what are you actually going to talk about? Because that's what they're going to remember. We support that with visual aids, okay, including word banks, toolkits, and symbols. All right. I'm not going to go into dual coding, but you might touch on that later on in your learning. Those sorts of things are coming to the forefront now, where we use images to back up what it is that we are talking about. The use of questioning is really important as well, to recall that information. So asking questions constantly of our pupils to try and recall what it is that they've already been taught. And knowledge organisers. Again, these are a buzzword thing at the moment, but we use them really well in this school. And it's important because the knowledge organisers, they look great in books, there's no denying that. And I know some of you have probably already spent hours creating them, but we use them to self-quiz. So our children use them as homework and revision. So they'll cover up key dates and facts and then test themselves on it, because what we want them to do is to store that information so that when they come to the essay, they can access it again. So when I talk about toolkits, I've just given you some images of what that looks like in a book. Okay, so we use these in all subject areas. So this is a toolkit for a year 6 child, I think, on factors and prime numbers. And again, what it does is it stops the teacher reteaching it. So what we say is, this is our toolkit. I'm going to show you how to find the highest common factor. Copy this down. Now you're going to use that. OK, because again, it stops us reteaching things. The toolkit for the properties of triangles. All right, get that information down. We're going to do a week's worth of this. Use that information yourself. And if we think about it, that's a skill for so much later on in life, especially in secondary schools when you're revising for your GCSEs. There's no harm in teaching that earlier. Here's a toolkit for year 2, which is an English toolkit that it essentially creates a success criteria. So who the audience is, what the structure should be, the language features and examples of where they would see this language. So even at year 2, we are providing them information that they can then use later on. Knowledge organisers hopefully won't look too different. We have a uniform approach in that our year 1 and our year 6 knowledge organisers, we use the exact same format. So as they go through school, children just know what a knowledge organiser is. We don't change them. Again, it can be maybe frustrating for teachers when they have to initially create them, but they stay the same. We don't change them. So this is a year 4 one on the Roman Empire. And again, so we'd be sending our children home, say, right, this weekend, I want you to practice all those Roman numerals, cover them with your hand, practice them with your parents, the dates on the timeline. Can you tell me when Julius Caesar was assassinated? That's important information that we want our children to know, especially when studying the Roman Empire. Alongside that, we create PowerPoints. So we have a standardized PowerPoint all the way through school for all our non-core and science. We have symbol keys. So for thoughts, retrieval of new information, learning goals, links across time. And when we say that this is an exercise book task, okay, so in year 1, they use the same PowerPoint. In year 6, they use the same PowerPoint. We are constantly starting with a previous lesson recap. What do you already know? That's the first part of every single session. And we're linking that back to what they've been previously taught in other year groups. In this lesson recap here, the teacher has chosen to add a toolkit. Okay, so again, sometimes it may seem like we're providing them the answers, but we're certainly not trying to catch our children out. We've come away from that. What we're trying to do is arm our children with as much of the information as possible so that they can store this and use it again and again and again. Okay, so we use Alan Pete sentences if that some of that doesn't make sense to you. Okay, and it's actually Mr. MacDonald this. So this is your toolkit. Write it in your book and refer to it when writing your final piece. Something that doesn't necessarily relate to work memory, but we've seen a big change in learning objectives because we had a big discussion as teachers. Learning objectives. I mean, it's in Key Stage 1, they took half an hour for the kids to write out the learning objective. And we had a big discussion about the fact that a child will probably write about 500 learning objectives a year. And why are they doing that? What is it for? So a guy that we worked with called Amjad Ali told us to add a so that. So the children write the LO, but we show them the so that. So can I use different techniques to improve my sentences so that my sentences become more interesting to read and less monotonous? Okay, it's a simple technique, and if you're ever going out on the placement, okay, it's something I recommend you do. It takes a second to add. So get them to write out the learning objective, but have a so that, because you're doing this because it's important. And then beyond this, so ultimately, once we've learned all that, it's so that we can use a variety of grammar and punctuation throughout our writing. Okay, so we have those 3 things for every lesson. And then a behaviour strategy that we also have on our PowerPoint is what level of noise does this lesson require? So we constantly have that conversation with our pupils. So on pins is silence, spy talk is where they can talk to their partner. Costa Coffee allows us a bit more chat around the classroom, maybe some music, and Wigging Away is obviously their outdoor voices, as we would call them. Those 2 things, again, those last 2 slides, sorry, don't necessarily link to working memory, but we introduced those this year into our PowerPoint, and they've had quite a big impact upon the behaviour in our classrooms and also the way children are able to discuss their learning, especially their learning objectives. So the impact of aligning that curriculum, the impact of focusing in on that 15-20 minutes, it's gained a better retention of powerful knowledge. So when our children come and share their work with our teachers, when we discuss what it is they're learning, it's unbelievable what they spew back. And it's great because subjects like history and geography are really important subjects. And to listen to a 10-year-old describe the impact of World War II on society and link it back to the Viking invasion and further back to the Roman invasion is unbelievable. It's created a streamlined, what we call essential curriculum. And that's like a really nice conversation to have as teachers as to what do we class as essential? And when those children grow older, they'll also have this discussion about what they class as essential, you know. So there's a lot of talk at the moment around Black history, and it's fantastic because it's just opened this whole different discussion about what books should be in each year group and why, and which authors should our children be reading. It's fantastic, and those sorts of arguments and discussions are healthy for schools because it makes you question what it is you're actually teaching. We're reducing the extraneous load, so we're trying not to have those wishy-washy lessons. And again, we still have our inspiration days, we still dress up, we still have World Book Days, we still have a reading cafe, we still run a restaurant, we still take them on, we aim to take them on 10 trips a year. We go to the Philharmonic, we go see the pantomime, we take them to International Slavery Museum, city centres, the mosque, all sorts of places. But what we try and come away from is wasting that learning time. You know, if you had a big clock on your wall which said you had 90 hours of geography for that entire year, and every lesson you taught, that clock reduced in time, it would make you think differently about what it was that you were actually teaching. It would really narrow down what information you wanted to give them. And of course, what it does is it allows the teacher to focus upon being the expert. So a class teacher at Cheverton Vale has a pre-planned long and medium term plan. They're already written. We have pre-written knowledge and skills document for every subject. So our teacher knows what's on the long term, what's on the medium term, and what learning objectives they have for every single subject. We have pre-selected reading books aligned to the curriculum. So they also know the learning objectives and the books that they're going to be reading, not just in English, but also in science, history, what poem they're going to focus on, what speech they're going to be learning. We have pre-written knowledge organisers for every foundation unit, again, already created so that a teacher was to move classes or we were to get a supply teacher, our entire curriculum's on a USB stick, there you go. That is what you're teaching. We have pre-written lesson continuums, and I've sent those over, which structure the learning for every subject. So every subject lead has written one for their subject. This is how we want geography taught. We want to know what you already know. We want to do some map work. We're going to ask these questions and then we're going to quiz you on it at the end. Okay, every subject is taught the exact same way with different tweaks. We have no marking or tracking. Okay, so we don't use target tracker, and our marking has become verbal feedback, which again has changed things for us quite dramatically. So finally, some of the research that our curriculum is based around, and I tried to link some of the stuff that would apply to you guys as trainees, is that in some ways automaticity is beneficial and critical to the effective functioning of a teacher in the classroom. It reduces the overall level of cognitive load necessary to process multiple complex interactions, which allows the allocation of working memory to careful assessments of the needs of individual students. What I love about this research is that this is from the point of view of a teacher. So I'm talking to you here about working memory in pupils and how our curriculum is aligned to ease their cognitive load. You've got to think of it yourself as a teacher. You're going to go into a class of 32 children who are all going to be pitching at different levels. You might have 9 different languages. You are going to spin some serious plates, okay? By reducing cognitive load on yourself enables you to meet the needs of more of your pupils. The maximisation of available cognitive resources will enable less experienced teachers to manage their classrooms successfully and allocate sufficient attention to the individual students they teach. One thing I pride myself on is that my behaviour management wasn't very good in my early teaching career. I relied upon being a bit dry, quite humorous. You know, I had an Xbox so I could relate to children at that level, but it only gets you so far. And what I found was by changing the curriculum this way, newer teachers, because they had everything pre-planned, could focus upon being a good teacher. Ultimately, that's what they're paid to do. They're paid to teach. So that part of their job role has to be the best. Everything else impedes upon that. So if we can reduce it, then they would become better teachers for it. So Insofar as there is any evidence from controlled studies, it almost uniformly supports direct, strong instructional guidance rather than constructivist-based minimal guidance during the instruction of novice to intermediate learners. Even for the students with considerable prior knowledge, strong guidance while learning is most often found to be equally as effective as unguided approaches. Not only is unguided instruction normally less effective, there is also evidence that it may have negative results when students acquire misconceptions or incomplete or disorganized knowledge. So I've sent those research papers over to Elizabeth, a bit of light reading for you on a Sunday if you want. But that research there is telling us volcanoes, that by me teaching them whilst they were paper macheing, they didn't gain the important knowledge that they needed, and also, worst, acquired misconceptions about volcanoes, which meant that going forward, they could have rocked up to year 9 without the prior knowledge that they needed in order to access that curriculum. Remember, you're preparing children always for the next stage. Okay, you've got to teach them what they need to learn to access that. And you've got about 15-20 minutes each lesson in which to do it. So it doesn't make the job any easier by knowing. Right, I've talked a lot there. I'm really, really sorry. But any questions that you have, fire them into the group, and I'll stop sharing this screen now so I can come back in.
Do you know, Andy, it's been quiet throughout, which shows how much they've been listening and hanging on every word. It's been really good.
It was like night nurse.
It was really good. Thank you.
Not a problem.
It's all quiet.
It's all right, don't worry. It's fine.
Well, and then it just went. Oh, they're coming in. Oh, so they're coming in now. An amazing lecture, thank you. How do you assess children's progress if they're not tracked?
Oh, brilliant. Right, okay. So this is one of my biggest bugbears as a teacher. Assessment drives me insane. So if you ever read anything by Tom Sherrington, he's quite an advocate for this. The Learning Rainforest is one of the books that he's written. And he essentially says that the best way to assess learning is to test them at the start and test them at the end. And if you think about our entire education system, well done, Elizabeth, the entire education system is it's based upon that. So if you think, I don't know, it might be a bit raw for some of you this, but if we think about the exams fiasco of last year, a perfect example of when we took the tests away, we didn't really know what to do instead. Now, when you're a year 6 teacher, you would find that your knowledge of children is so much better than those teachers in year 4, year 3, because you're just testing them more. You're doing further assessments. So what we decided was that in all our subject areas, we would just bring in more testing. Now, again, what we cleverly did was call them quizzes because, you know, we didn't want children like not having breakfast in the morning because they were sick. But what we find is that they actually really like the challenge of it. They look forward to it. So they'll say, oh, I've got my geography quiz today. In science, we've broken it down into chemistry, biology and physics. So you will hear a year 1 child say, I have got a physics quiz this morning. And again, that's what we're trying to do. We're just trying to normalize it. So what we do then is we retain the quiz results. OK, so we always do it out of 10. Every quiz across school is out of 10. And then they do an essay at the end. If you've read anything by Daisy, I can never say her surname, Christiologlu, I think it is. She has written a lot about comparative judgment, which is basically, in its simplest terms, you put your best writer at the top and then you compare against. And we basically put everything in order. So our top essay, we would give that 10 marks and then we would limit it down. OK, and then what we then do is as a school, we look at those children in all their subject areas and we scale score them. So we've created essentially our own assessment system. So when I say there's no tracking, what I mean is we're not filling in daft spreadsheets because, again, I'll be honest, when I had to do it, all I did was make sure my spreadsheet matched my kids. I didn't really fill it in. I just, know that I needed 80% to be at this level because that's what I was working off. So I just coloured in the objectives that I had done, because you're teaching so much that becomes a time-consuming exercise. So the way we have done it is that we just say, right, keep your quiz scores, and then we have a staff meeting dedicated to comparative judgment of essays. And then what we then do is create a scaled score for each pupil. But what we found is that it suddenly highlights our children that are fantastic geographers, fantastic historians, those children that are unbelievable at D&T. So even with art and D&T, we're still quiz, but we will also grade their final pieces, which again is more secondary when you think about it. But in primary, why not? Why not look at the best portrait? And as a staff, discuss why we think it is. So although we've moved away from tracking, I'd argue we're assessing even more. It's just we've taken the bureaucratic red tape down, I think, is possibly the best way to look at it. And again, you've got to remember what assessment is for. Assessment is to tell you what you haven't taught them yet, because you may think that you've taught it, but if they've not retained it, nothing's changed in that long-term memory. It was a waste of time. And and that again, when you're a year 6 teacher, is heartbreaking, because you get to Christmas and you spend all autumn term on place value, and they don't know how to times a decimal by 10. So that constant assessing just enables our teachers to know those kids inside out. So hopefully that answers that one.
I think there's some really good points you've raised there. That, like, I was a year 6 teacher for 4 years, and that I think tests are often seen as being something really bad, but actually it's the way in which they're used that I think is really key. And because they're used to actually plan what it is you're going to teach them, the children are really used to them. They don't become such high stakes assessments. And as a teacher, I think seeing 30 children answering the same question, assuming they can all access it, who can answer it, who can't, that's what you teach them next. I think it makes teaching sound a lot simpler than it is, but yeah, if you've got to use that assessment day, I think the issue with SATs is the importance they're given in terms of judging a school. It's not the actual questions they're answering themselves, it's what they represent. And talking about Daisy, I think it's Crystalado, but I'm not certain either. And that's 7 myths about education. I think it's called something like that. One of the very few books I've read that's actually changed my mind on educational things quite substantially. And I wouldn't fully agree with everything she says, but it has made me think about things in a different way in terms of skill-based versus knowledge-based curricula. I don't know if that's one you're aware of in terms of that publication, either of you, but it's something like 7 myths about education, and it's really worth reading.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think it's hard because our own understanding of education is our own experience. If you ever read anything by Paul Dix, he highlights like the way you are with kids is because that's how your teachers were with you. But that's not an education system. We can't just keep repeating the mistakes of the past. And I don't like admitting it, but in my early years, I do look back and think, what on earth was I doing? What a waste of time that was, and I look, sometimes it's hard with trainees. What have I got in at the moment? We've got 5 PGCE students in at the moment. And, and you're trying to encourage, don't be laminating until 1 o'clock in the morning. What is it that you're teaching? What's the end result of this lesson? Don't get me wrong. We all, and those of you watching at home, you'll all want to be that outstanding teacher. You will be. And that's why you've applied to do this job. We all want to be. But ultimately, you have got to meet the needs of 32 children. And your task is to teach them what is it you want them to know by the end of this lesson. And sometimes that needs you to be the expert, to stand at the front. I've got knowledge of Mount Fuji in Japan. I'm going to tell you all about it, and I'm going to show you some pictures, and you're going to go away and practice and retain that knowledge, and then I'm going to quiz you on it, and then we're going to move on. And it sounds, even just saying it here, very boring, but actually that's where the learning takes place. And sometimes when we forget that and we try and go a bit wacky and a bit wonderful, sometimes your behaviour management is the first thing that slips, but also the learning gets lost because of that extraneous load, because of that distraction. We do our children sometimes a disservice. So what we try to do here at Shepperton Vale is make sure that our lessons are very academic, because we want them to be, but we back it up with those experiences. So if you've ever watched Matt Damon and Robin Williams, the film has gone on. Say that, Will Hunting, thank you very much. So he sits with him on the bench in the park, and basically Matt Damon's had a go at his lesson, and Robin Williams takes a bit of offence, but he says, Michelangelo, you can tell me everything about Michelangelo, but you've never left Boston. I've been to the Sistine Chapel and looked up at the roof and gone, wow. And I think for me, that's our curriculum. That's what I want. I'd love to take our kids to the Sistine Chapel, but if we're teaching about Vikings, then they should go to the Jorvik Viking Centre. If we're going to teach about civil rights, they should go to the International Slavery Museum. So though it's about that academic being backed up by those experiences, and again, thinking about images and processing those 1,000 times faster. That's what you've got to do. That's what you remember. If you think about your own primary school experience, you remember sports day, you remember your Christmas plays, you remember that time a dog ran on the field, so those are the things that we do remember about primary school, because those are experiences. That's what the brain remembers, and the emotions behind it. So if we can tune into that as well as retaining that academic side, then we're winning, certainly.
It's so quiet, Andy. They're all just listening. We need to have you back lots and lots.
Yeah, definitely.
We do.
I'm just scrolling through now, so apologies. Obviously, the slides didn't work.
We might have more actually, but the one that we published is what she said. What did you mean by pre-written lessons? Who writes them, and when, and how is it organised, please? And but she did say, thank you for a really informative lecture, and that was Eve.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. So I think what I mean by that is we still have teacher autonomy. You've got to, okay. I'm very lucky. The squad here is unbelievable. So what we wanted to do, though, is take away that pressure, because when the 2014 curriculum came out, and I think a lot of schools missed the boat with this, and I know, and include our own school in that, is that the emphasis upon the non-core. If you look at, say, the geography expectations at year 6, especially around the language being used, coastal erosion. I mean, I remember learning that in year 9, and you can see how that challenge has dropped into primary. So you can't not have a great knowledge of geography. You can't, okay? You couldn't teach coastal erosion, okay, and the different types of coastal erosion without a secure subject knowledge. So what we've tried to do is try and take that pressure away from the teacher in terms of the planning side of those lessons. So what we've done is created a continuum, and they're all very, very similar. They all start with a prior knowledge quiz. So I want to already ask you what you already know about coastal erosion. Do you know where it takes place? Do you know where it happens? Then we're going to give you a glossary. So that happens in every subject. So these are the words that I want you to know and the definitions by the end of it. We try and include a timeline as well, because we found our children's understanding of chronology is pretty poor. I think children all over the world struggle with time as a concept in general. So even in geography, we might do a timeline of coastal erosion, perhaps focus on Formby Beach and look at how many meters it moved in 2 months, for example. And then we would have our taught sessions, and then that would end with a quiz. So our teachers know when they pick up geography, I have to do these lessons in that order. What the teacher then chooses to teach is strictly, supposedly, up to them. They have the objectives and the vocabulary that they need to cover, and they have a running order. The rest is up to them. Okay, so what we've taken away is, I suppose, the Sunday night document creation, where you would say, here's my short-term planning, Andy, I'm going to hand that in. Like, I don't need to see that, because I could tell you how your geography lesson unit is going to go. Okay, I just want to know that you've got the time to teach them everything that they need to know on coastal erosion, because in truth, you've got 5 afternoons to do that in, and it's really, really tough. So that's what I mean by pre-written lessons. It's not that I don't have a script for every teacher. Teacher autonomy is important, and the skills that these guys bring to the table, I never want to take that away. But especially with NQTs and newer teachers, I just don't want them to have all these external things to think about, when actually I just want them to concentrate on becoming better teachers and also develop that subject knowledge. Because if you know that you've got coastal erosion coming up, I'd rather you spent your Sunday night YouTube videos of coastal erosion and having a bit of a cramming session on what coastal erosion is, so that when you stepped in front of them on Monday, you know exactly what it is you're talking about, rather than spending Sunday night writing 2 sides of A4 about what your lessons are going to look like. But that's how we approach it anyway.
Really good. An anonymous, so unfortunately I don't know this person's name. I love the level of noise required, chat. Do your children engage with this more, rather than you need to work in silence?
Yeah, hugely so. So again, Amjad Ali, he's on Twitter. He has a website called Try This Teaching. He's just brilliant. So his whole mantra is, what works for SEND works for all. So he says that essentially noise level is a huge issue for SEND children. So especially children who are perhaps autistic, they really struggle with distracting sounds, and you'd be surprised at how distracting a classroom can be for some of our children. So he said you've got to educate children as to what an appropriate level of noise is, because if you think about their home environment, I've got some kids here who are like 1 of 5. Their house is absolute chaos. So I'm watching them on home learning, thinking, God, how on earth are they coping in that environment? So it's about educating the children. So we have that discussion at the start of every lesson. Now, by the time they're in year 3, you'd like to think you can just quickly show that slide. What level of noise does this require? Ooh, spy talks. I need to talk to the person next to me. Brilliant. Right, off you go. OK, and then you can refer back to it then. So you can say, is this spy talk, or are we going to get caught out by the CIA here? You know, you can do all of those things, but they respond so much better to that than me standing at the front going, absolute silence, please. Don't want you talking, me raising my voice all the time. The sort of the humorous side of it as well just adds, because they just quite like that spy talk. And it worked. You see them doing it, you know, and Costa Coffee as well. They associate that with being an adult and seeing their mums having the chats and things. So again, it's interesting, really. It was just one slide, add it to the PowerPoint, and it works. And as a head teacher, I can walk around my classes and go, ooh, spy talk, well done, you know, and just refer to the noise level of the classroom and praise them for that. So yeah, again, when you do go into your schools, try that one. It works. Have that first session where you discuss noise level. What do you want to call it? Because you can't call it Wigan Away if you're working in Lee or St Helens. But you know, you can put your own spin on it.
Any more questions?
Any questions about marking? I often get questioned about marking.
Nothing coming up in a minute.
All right. Okay. Brilliant.
No.
Okay.
No, I think then, Andy, it has gone quiet.
Right.
We will leave it there. Thank you so much. I know David's in and out because David's got programs board.
Right,
so he's here. He's here.
Yeah, I'm back in now. Sorry, I've been having to alternate with giving updates. Sorry.
I know. I should have been there, but I couldn't.
No, it's fine.
Yeah,
that's fine. And thank you so much, Andy. Like Elizabeth's been saying, never seen such high level, or rarely seen such high levels of appreciative feedback, and be a pleasure to have you on board again at some point in the near future. So thank you. For the trainees that are there, obviously this recording will go on to Blackboard at some point today. We'll add Andy's slides, and then at some point before the week's out, the documents that you sent me, Andy, I'll add them to Blackboard as well that underpin the presentation, so they'll have access to what you had access to.
Yeah, not a problem.
Great
no,
stuff.
very much. Really enjoyed it. Really, do
Great.
it in a geeky kind of way. I really enjoyed it. So thanks very much.
Yeah, we'll let your governors know. You've done them proud.
Brilliant, Andy. Thank you
Brilliant.
so
Okay.
much.
Thanks so much for your time. All right.
Yeah.
No worries. Take
You
care.
too. Take care. All the very best.
Bye. 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 Bye.
Elizabeth, any messages to the students, or should I finish up?
No. Well done. I think throughout there, really good engagement. It was so quiet, which showed we were hanging on everywhere. It was an amazing lecture. Really, really good. Super. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Thank
Right.
everybody.
Speak to you soon. Take care.
Yeah,
See you tomorrow, everyone.
David, we had.
Smashing. That's good for an afternoon one. That's really good,
Yeah.
considering a lot of stuff. And I know many of them share computers as well.
Yeah. So it's really
Great
good.
stuff.
Yeah. Thank you,
Speak to
everybody.
you soon, everyone. Take care. Bye bye.
See you later. Thanks, David. Bye-bye. Bye.